Welcome back, everybody, to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys for another fun offseason topic. One that we know people got takes on. We're ranking offensive lines across the NFL. Specifically, we're looking at the offensive line ranking article that Zoltan Boudet did over at PFF.com. Zoltan does a great job adjusting these rankings every single week of the season. And of course, as it is ranking season for the offseason, he turned his attention into saying like, hey, this is what I think of the offensive lines going into the 2025 season. And then he's the one who kind of adjusts these rankings week in and week out. So he knows the offensive lines around the NFL very well. He did these rankings for us here this summer. And Dalton and I are going to judge him harshly and swiftly for these rankings, and of course tell him exactly where he is wrong and the things that we might change and the reasons why. Dalton, how you doing, my friend?
Good 4th of July weekend, and honestly, I think this is one of my favorite episodes we're going to do this summer because you cannot win a championship without at least a very good offensive line nowadays, and sometimes it feels like we can eliminate certain teams from that contention just based maybe even on these rankings, right? If their offensive line doesn't block better than it did last year, doesn't significantly improve, then it's a real problem for a lot of teams towards the bottom of the list, and then you have a lot of championship contenders rightfully toward the top because they can get two-dimensional with their offensive lines in the run game and the pass game. So I'm looking forward to these rankings and really breaking them down.
All right, hold on, Mr. Pessimist. All right, this is still the season of hope. This is the time of hope for all 32 teams, and you're out here saying like, nah, let's eliminate these teams. Let's get it out of the way quickly.
There's a case to be made. You could do it. It's possible.
Well. As we get into this right away, there is one of these teams that absolutely has Super Bowl aspirations that is in the lower tier of these rankings. So let's get to it. Let's look at, you guys can see this over at PFF.com. You can see all the rankings there. You can follow along here on the show. And you can tell us, I would love for you guys to, as we go through this exercise, tell us in the chat some of the offensive lines that you think are underrated, overrated, whatever, because there's a lot of change along most offensive lines, right? Certainly the ones that did not perform well last season, as Dalton kind of alluded to there. They normally try to have the most changes because, of course, like Dalton mentioned, you can't win a Super Bowl without a great offensive line. So some of these offensive lines will take a little bit of a projection, right? It's a little bit of a, hey, this is what I think will happen with this new group, and we'll get to some reasons why. But other ones are a little bit more solidified, like you said. So let's take a look at this. Of course, you guys can take a look at it for yourself over at PFF.com. But we'll go in increments of 5. But of course, because 32 is not an even increment of 5 for this first group, we'll give you a couple more here. And number 32, last on the list, of course, we're going to save the best for last. You guys got to stick around to see who's number 1. We have the Houston Texans. Houston Texans here. Zoltan has them at number 32 at the bottom of the list. Number 31, this is the team that I was alluding to, that is Super Bowl aspirations and a Super Bowl roster in certain ways. Certainly a quarterback, offensive weapons, a team that can light up the scoreboard. But the offensive line, Zoltan's got his concerns here. He has them at number 31. 30, it's the Seattle Seahawks. 29, the New England Patriots. 28, the New York Giants. 27, the Cleveland Browns. And then 26, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's start with 32. I'm going to start with the last team sort of as we go through each one of these groups. Houston Texans, a lot of change along this offensive line, and we have talked about throughout the offseason, we don't even know exactly who the starting 5 is going to be for the Houston Texans because they made so many changes, and one in particular was shipping off the best offensive lineman that they had. You know, in Laramie Tunsil, he's no longer on the team. Now, of course, what came out after that trade is, they moved on from Laramie Tunsil, not because he wasn't performing up to his abilities or what he was getting paid via his contract, but I guess the leadership in the group, leadership by example type of things. I don't know. That's what the reports were. We're obviously not in the locker room, so we can't exactly speak to that, but we can speak to the data. And the data said you got rid of your most impactful offensive lineman. This is also sort of a difficult situation when you look at all the offensive linemen that they have there now. Okay, they're adding guys like Cam Robinson and Laken Tomlinson. They drafted Ariante Ursary, brought in Ed Ingram, brought in Trent Brown, but you have Jarrett Patterson, Titus Howard is still there, Juice Scruggs is there. Who amongst those group of names is going to come out as the starting 5 there in Houston? And it's a tough task because, Dalton, something specific that I wanted to look up with this group and what's in front of them in 2025, CJ Stroud had the 7th highest time to throw average last year. Now, there's a little bit of causation into that. Okay, if the offensive line wasn't playing the way that they needed to, which they weren't, then CJ is going to have to hold on to the ball a little bit longer because he's probably going to be navigating the pocket, avoiding pressure, even scrambling outside of the tackle. So a little bit goes into that, but still, when you hold on to the ball for a long time, you are asking your offensive line to play better for longer. And sometimes that's just a very difficult thing to do. And so not only is there unknown with them of who the starting five is even going to be, but of course you're moving on from your best guy, and the fact that CJ Stroud had a longer time to throw. I can understand there's a lot of pressure in the ask of this offensive line. All of those things go into them being 32. Would they be 32 for you here is sort of the question that I'll start with, and Jen, just overall thoughts with Houston.
Yeah, I think I agree with them at 32 because honestly, we really don't. We can speculate, but we're not going to know at all what their front five looks like probably until at least midway through the preseason, right? And you talk about there's some veterans in there like Cam Robinson and Titus Howard, like you mentioned. There's some young guys mixed in, but there's probably 8, 9, even 10 players who are competing for these 5 spots, some with a little bit of an upper hand, but this was the biggest problem for the Texans last year, especially in the interior, protecting C.J. Stroud, and especially as the weapons started to break down as well with Tank Dell's injury, Stephon Diggs' injury, it really started to feel like just C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins trying to carry a whole lot of dead weight behind them. So I do agree, because of just the speculation and the lack of clarity that we have on who the starting 5 is, that the Texans should start here at 32.
Yeah, I'll jump up to, we can touch on the Bengals in a second, but I want to jump up to the Seattle Seahawks, who they have at number 30. And Seattle made a lot of changes throughout their team, obviously moving on from guys like Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. You're moving on from Geno Smith. You're bringing in Sam Darnold. And we were like, okay, like I understand, like, bringing Sam Darnold in, you got to upgrade to the quarterback position, especially if you're moving on from Geno Smith. But if you don't have the offensive line in front of him, man, Sam Darnold, we've seen him struggle under pressure before, and that's what the worry was. Dalton, this unit, 38% pressure percentage. That was worst in the NFL last year. Now, they draft Gray Zabel, who I think is going to be better for them anyways. I'm hoping that Christian Haynes can take that step up. You like the 2 offensive tackles in Abe Lucas and Charles Cross when they are healthy. You're hoping that Abe Lucas is going to be healthy for a full season. But, man, I can understand them still being 30 in the rankings just because the numbers were so poor for them last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially you look at the interior 3, and you're going to have a wide open competition, I think, at both guard spots and the center spot. We'll see if Zabel's playing either center or guard, or if it'll be Olu Oluwatimi. But I think the idea here is going to be young players developing under their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak. Whoever can run this outside zone scheme and then pass protect for Sam Darnold well enough, especially in play action, those are the guys who are going to play. So it's going to be a fascinating battle to watch, I think, at all 3 of those interior spots.
Now, for the New England Patriots at number 29, I think a lot of people would say, like, okay, the Patriots have the worst offensive line in the NFL, right? I mean, like, they've got unknowns. Morgan Moses is coming in, Garrett Bradbury's coming in, Will Campbell's coming in, but, like, those are unknowns. Those aren't guys who have all played together before. A lot of guys that were there last year just straight up did not play well enough. I talked about how the Seahawks had the worst pressure percentage of any offensive line in the NFL. The Patriots had the second worst. They also had the second lowest pass blocking grade as a team, behind only the New Orleans Saints last year. So this offensive line was not good enough. There's no other way to say it, but they made a lot of changes. So how do you feel about Zoltan having them at 29, given the fact that they did make a lot of moves, and clearly he thinks that it's going to be a little bit better now that those guys are there?
I don't have an issue with it because I think we need to see it be better, right? I like the addition of Morgan Moses in the short term at right tackle. Micah Wenu's still solid at right guard. You're getting Cole Strange back, who only played 2 games last year at center. He'll be back at his natural left guard spot, but the ceiling is going to be determined by the number 4 overall pick, Will Campbell at left tackle. And then maybe, I know Garrett Bradbury's the veteran. He might get the first shot, but maybe also the 3rd-round pick, Jared Wilson, out of Georgia at center. That's what they're trying to do, is develop these young guys, especially on the left side when you're talking about Campbell, Strange, and perhaps Jared Wilson. So I do think the ceiling is a little bit higher than a couple of these teams below them, but I don't mind leaving them down here towards the bottom until we see it be better in front of Drake May.
Okay, so what do you think of the Giants? I got a couple numbers that I want to talk about with the New York Giants, but really it comes down to the fact that they had the 28th ranked pass blocking grade as a unit last year. And then when you look at run blocking, we can cite run blocking grades, and I think those are fine. But what I really like to do when it comes to run blocking is look at the impact run blocking percentage as a team. So just to let people know sort of the terminology of what we're talking about here, an impact run blocking percentage basically means how often are you gaining a positive grade? Because at PFF, there are some plays that we have where I just go, okay, yeah, like you did your job. It was fine. It wasn't bad. You weren't a reason why the play didn't go well. You weren't a standout reason why the play was even better than expected. You just did your job on this play. And normally that's just a checkbox, a 0, like this is what you got. And An impact play is categorized as, do you have a positive grade on this play, whether it's a plus 0.5, a plus 1, a plus 1.5, or even a plus 2, which is the highest that you could get, which is an above and beyond incredible play. You're the reason why this play was just unbelievable. Like, you did your job very, very well. When you gain a positive play, we count that as an impact play percentage. The New York Giants as a team had the 27th ranked impact run blocking percentage as a team, which means they just didn't have a lot of positive run blocking plays that we recorded. So not only do you have the pass blocking grade, which was ranked 28th in the NFL, you have the impact run blocking plays, and there just weren't a lot of them. They were 27th in the NFL. So it's a unit that, okay, we've got a 28. Zoltan mentions, really, it's Andrew Thomas basically anchoring this group. How worried are you about the New York Giants offensive line? Because everybody's talking about the quarterbacks. Everybody's talking about Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or what Jackson Dart is going to be when he eventually becomes a starter, which we feel like is inevitable. But I don't think we're talking about the offensive line enough for the Giants. What do you think about them being ranked 28th here, and your thoughts about them moving into the season?
I agree. I think there's veterans that give them something of a baseline, although not that high. It's the biggest concern on the entire team for me, even more so than the quarterbacks. I actually think Russell Wilson can come in and play reasonably well, but this offensive line, I'm worried about it, because you go, okay, it's not a great group of running backs you have back there. You have Cam Scatterbo, Devin Singletary, Tyrone Tracy, but you need to be able to protect Wilson. You need to be able to open holes for those guys, and Brian Daboll wants to run the football. It just doesn't happen very well there. And you take out Andrew Thomas, who was hurt for a lot of last year, and the other four starters are coming back, but their PFF grades 56, 61, 63, and 63. There's just not a whole lot of impact there. So it's actually my biggest concern for this offense functioning, even more so than the quarterback spot, is how well can they block, how well can they pass protect for Wilson, who's not as mobile as he used to be, and how often can they open holes in the run game for a group of running backs that doesn't have a superstar, right? So I think this front five, especially the health of Andrew Thomas and him returning to being a star, is maybe the biggest factor in them having any success on offense this year.
I've said this on the show before. I'm worried about the Cleveland Browns offensive line. Like, they are ranked, where was this? They are ranked 27th on this list, and I think that's basically just out of respect for Wyatt Teller and Joe Bitonio. But like, those two guys, they miss a little bit of time. They're getting older. The offensive tackles, I think, are a massive projection for them. I mean, they still have Jack Conklin, but what's DeJuan Jones going to be? Can Ethan Post be what he needs to be at that center spot? So it's a lot of names that you know, but they just haven't played really well together, and I do get very worried about that Cleveland Browns offensive line. The Jags are one of those teams that, before the show, you and I were kind of chit-chatting a little bit, and we're like, yeah, there's a handful of teams that we move up or down or whatever. The Jags are one of those teams that I would probably move up a little bit. I've got some faith in the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line going into this season. I like what Walker Little was able to show. He played over 500 snaps last season at left tackle. He was their highest graded offensive tackle on the team. I'm an Anton Harrison believer. I feel like if we're going to see it from him, the timeline was always going to be a couple years into his NFL career. I think this could be a really good year for him, and so I'll still keep that faith there. They've got Ezra Cleveland. Now they add Robert Hainsey. They've got Patrick McCarry as well. And then they drafted Wyatt Milam too. So this is an offensive line that I feel like I've got a little bit more faith in. I feel like I'd have them a little bit closer to ranked around the 20th, right around that edge. It feels like that's sort of where they were with their PFF passing grade and some of their impact run plays last year. And I feel like the offensive line is only going to get better this upcoming season. So they were one of those teams that would move up a little bit. What say you about the Jacksonville Jaguars?
I get it. I think you have more veteran stability on the inside with McCarry and Hainsey coming in. And really, it's a group that just needs to be good enough for Trevor Lawrence to be able to get the ball to these receivers, right? He's got Brian Thomas, who's a star. He's got Travis Hunter, who's a potential star. Brenton Strange at tight end, right? The two backs also can work out of the backfield pretty well. But I think that's what you're looking for, is good enough. If I can just get a healthy 17 games with Trevor Lawrence, which you really haven't gotten the last 2 years, then you start to talk about, okay, this is an explosive offense, but he has to be able to be in clean pockets since in his career, 5 years into his career now. You're talking about a guy who's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league under pressure. You just can't have him under pressure too often. We've seen the injuries. We've seen the ineffectiveness. They need to be good enough up front. I could see adjusting him a few spots, but I also don't mind them being here because I don't think their ceiling is that high.
Last team we're talking about from this group is the Cincinnati Bengals. You mentioned before we even started this exercise, before we even got the list out, that there are teams where you almost eliminate them because of their offensive lines. I'm not gonna say, like, are you already eliminating the Cincinnati Bengals? Because I don't think either of us are doing that. But it's concerning seeing them at number 31 here. Now, they've got the mammoth offensive tackles, but those guys have to stay healthy. They have to play well together. Amarius Mims has to have his most healthy, most successful season yet. Orlando Brown Jr. has to as well. And the interior offensive line just was not good enough for Cincinnati last year. And there's a couple of guys that are still there. There's a couple of spots that might be up for grabs that we might be changed along that interior offensive line at those guard spots. But them being at 31 is concerning. Yeah, Joe Burrow, I think, can absolve you of a lot of sins. So Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those guys can do a lot for you. But when you have to make up for your offensive line, that's just it's never a good thing to say. It's never a great projection that's there. So I think my question to you is, do you think 31 is a fair ranking for the Bengals? Would you have them a little bit higher? What's your faith level for this team and how much Joe Burrow is either going to play off of the offensive line well or make up for the offensive line with some of the deficiencies?
I think it's absolutely fair. I mean, you have last year they were the lowest graded group of guards in the league, and I don't see anything significantly better, right? You have a third-round rookie, and you have Lucas Patrick, who's floated around the league. You've got Ted Karras, who's maybe average at center, and then these two tackles that have to play better. If there's any sign of improvement that's going to come out of this unit, it's going to be Brown and Mims playing better, especially Mims. We just haven't seen a whole lot of excellent play from him through his first two seasons, right? So I think you're banking on that potential of the two tackles, but for the most part, it's kind of a veteran unit that you know what it's going to be, and you know Joe Burrow's going to have to work around it. So it's one of their biggest obstacles. Obviously, their defense has gotten a lot of flack over the last year, and rightfully so, but this feels like just the same conversation we've had for Joe Burrow's entire career, is that he's going to have to work around poor pass protection.
All right, let's move on. The next five that we have here, starting with the Miami Dolphins, ranked at number 25. They don't have Teron Armstead anymore, so you're getting some shakeup there along their offensive line. The Tennessee Titans at number 24. They've had a little bit of shakeup as well. Another year older for some of these younger offensive linemen, specifically J.C. Latham getting to move back to right tackle after they signed Dan Moore Jr. in free agency. The Dallas Cowboys, man, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Booker getting inserted into that lineup. What's Tyler Guyton going to be this year? How they're going to replace Zach Martin? I think a lot goes into that. Very curious to hear your thoughts on the Dallas Cowboys. The New Orleans Saints. This is interesting because this was a group that had the lowest passing grade in the NFL last season. Now, you're hoping that you get Eric McCoy fully healthy. Your Trevor Penning is moving from offensive tackle to inside. You draft the guy at number 9 overall in Kelvin Banks Jr. You move into Taliese Fuanga back to his home at right tackle. There's reason to have optimism there, but 22, it feels like Zoltan's believing in that quite a bit. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21, a very young offensive line. Broderick Jones, Zach Frazier, Troy Faltano, who you're hoping to get back and fully healthy going into this season. There's a lot of guys that are fun along that offensive line if they all continue to take that step up and play well together. But curious as to whether or not you think 21 is the right number for them. The Dolphins at 25, though. You're moving on from Teron Armstead. Patrick Paul's getting slated in there. James Daniel, who looked very good, very small sample size last year, though. Do you have faith in him along that interior offensive line? Jonah Savanaia from Arizona, probably getting to play one of those guard spots as well. So thoughts on the Dolphins' offensive line here to kick us off?
I think if you wanted to, you could argue the Dolphins even lower. I think because what we've seen the last 2 years in the games that Teron Armstead has missed, they've really been a mess. And for a team that desperately needs to find pass protection for a quarterback that's been hurt all but 1 year of his career, it's a real problem. Patrick Paul, like you just mentioned, James Daniel coming off a torn Achilles. Aaron Brewer's never been great in pass protection, kind of undersized. Jonah Savaiinea played more tackle than guard in college. And Austin Jackson is a solid player. So there's not an elite player as of right now. And I still have the same pass protection concerns that I've had the last 2 years, maybe even more so with this team with Armstead gone. So I know there's been a lot of pessimism with the Dolphins, but kind of rightfully so, especially when you look at this offensive line in tandem with a quarterback that really needs elite pass protection to succeed.
Do we think they're athletic enough? I think that's the big question here for Miami's offensive line, right? Because when you look at McDaniel coming from the Shanahan coaching tree and everything, like not every run play is going to be to the sideline and an outside zone and things like that. They're obviously going to mix a lot of those things in, but when you talk about having skill position players that are very fast, in my opinion, you do have to mirror that a little bit with what you have along your offensive line. And you've got Jalen Waddle, you got Tyreek Hill, you got a Devon Achane, you've got Jalen Wright as well. Like, you just have a ton of speed on this team. Malik Washington, who I think is going to have a nice season for them as a slot wide receiver and a potential number 3 in their target game there. But to me, I just don't think the offensive line speed matches what the rest of the skill position players have. Now, obviously, Jonah Savanaia is not going to be as fast as Tyreek Hill. That's not what I'm trying to say here, but it just feels as though they're not the caliber athletes that Miami would like to lean on for their offensive line. So I think that's also a reason why I'd be a little bit lower on them as well. I talked about how I'd have Jacksonville a little bit higher. This is one of the teams that I would have Jacksonville higher than Miami when we're doing these rankings here. But what's your thoughts just overall on the athletic potential of this group? Because I think it matters a lot for what Miami wants to do.
I think they could be athletic enough. Brewer at center is obviously a really good athlete, but he's a smaller player. I think, to me, actually, in those cold weather games that Miami always gets criticized for losing, and there's times with, I don't know if they're actually physical enough. Because if you go back to it, Patrick Paul in college was a better pass protector than he was a run blocker. Savaianea, the same thing, way better in pass pro than he is as a run blocker. Aaron Brewer, he's just so small that he can run the zone stuff, but there's times when you go, okay, the size is a limitation when it comes to being physical, right? I think James Daniels could be physical enough. I think Austin Jackson could, but I kind of question the younger players a little bit, going, okay, if this is a team that's going to build themselves around running the football, even with it being lateral and more outside zone, the Shanahan-McDaniel scheme, I just think at some point you need to be able to physically push people around, and when there's games that get physical and get tough, the Dolphins have struggled to do that in the past, and I don't see how it's going to get better here.
Dallas Cowboys, your thoughts on their offensive line? Cooper Beebe played well last year at that center spot. Tyler Guyton did not. It was a struggle of a season there for him. You got Tyler Booker that you're inserting into that starting lineup, but it's sort of like a one in, one out. Like, okay, we might like Tyler Booker, but we don't have Zach Martin anymore. What's your thoughts on the Dallas Cowboys offensive line going into this season?
I actually don't mind the interior. I like Tyler Smith. He's a good player. I think Cooper Beebe's going to be even better at center in year 2. And Tyler Booker, I think Brian Schottenheimer is going to get more downhill with this run game, a little more power, even going back to his days of as an offensive coordinator. I remember watching with the Jets and then obviously with Seattle. I think he's going to want to get downhill in the run game, but I have concerns about the tackles. Terrence Steele did not have a good year last year, and Tyler Guyton had maybe as bad a rookie year as you could have at left tackle, got benched at one point, too many penalties. The fact that he was so raw in pass protection coming out of Oklahoma, I think really hurt him playing so much in year 1. So I like the interior and what's going on there. It might take Booker some time to adjust to NFL speed, but the tackles are the ones that concern me. They really need to play better, especially with Prescott coming back off of an injury. If they can do that, then they could be a really good offense, but that's where I'm looking at, especially that left tackle spot with Tyler Guyton.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive tackles. They had the 2 highest pressure percentages of any of the offensive linemen that the Cowboys had last season. Tyler Guyton, 7.5% pressure percentage, and Terrence Steele, 6.3%, the rest of the group. If you don't include Zach Martin, I mean, Tyler Smith was a 3.5, Cooper Beebe was a 2.9. Now it's a little bit easier to not record a pressure percentage when you are in the interior because you have some help, but still, I mean, that's significant that if you attack the offensive tackles, it normally went well for you. Neither of those guys, Tyler Guyton or Terrence Steele, had a pass blocking grade above 60.5. So definitely something that needs to take a step up this year. And I can understand the reason for optimism, and it's a new offense, and so you wonder how the offensive line is going to play behind that new offense. But 23 feels, again, like feels. Maybe it's right. I was going to say it feels a little bit high for him, but they did have some good play. I mean, Tyler Smith's a good player. Cooper Beebe's a good player. I think that Booker could be good in this system. So maybe 23 is right. Good job, Sultan. I thought I was going to criticize you there, but we came around to it. The Saints at 22. I don't know. To me, this is, again, it's a lot of just hoping it's going to be a lot different than it was last year. And there's reason to believe that it could, but I would have still had New Orleans lower than this. You could say to yourself, well, Trevor Penning's going to be on the interior now, so it's all going to be it's all good to go. Is it? Yeah, maybe it will be, but I don't think that's a big time guarantee. And for as much as I like Kelvin Banks Jr., for 2025 specifically, he's still a rookie. Rookie left tackle starting in the NFL. That's just it's a tough gig for how good these pass rushers are nowadays. And so I'd have New Orleans a little bit lower, but I could see the reason for optimism. Are you a little bit higher on them than I am?
I could reason with 22, because if Eric McCoy comes back healthy, that makes a big difference. Really, when he got hurt is when it really started to go downhill last year. So McCoy is really good when he's healthy. Ruiz at right guard is good enough. I think Talisi Fuaga is going to benefit from going back to his natural position. Not that he was bad at left tackle last year, but moving back to the right side is really going to help him. And I like Kelvin Banks. I think he's going to have a solid rookie season and develop from there. He's a really good athlete, as you know. who I think he's going to be able to make the adjustment. So left guard's a huge question. Is it going to be Trevor Penning? Is it going to be, I think they have Dylan Radins. Is it going to be somebody else that emerges at that spot? Sure, but at least we know for a fact who 4 of their 5 starters are, and some of these teams below them, we can't even say that for sure. And if McCoy is healthy, I think they'll be a lot better on the interior, because when he got hurt last year, that's when it really started to fall apart.
We've talked plenty about what the Pittsburgh Steelers have done at a lot of different positions, but we haven't talked a lot about their offensive line. And like you mentioned, the offensive line can sometimes be the reason that you either don't make the playoffs, don't make a playoff run, whatever it is. So DK Metcalf, Aaron Rodgers, the defensive additions that they've had, is the offensive line, in theory, the projected offensive line, good enough in Pittsburgh for you to think that they could survive a very, very tough division and get into the playoffs this year?
It's a theory, and I think that's what it is right now, because you've got a quarterback, an older quarterback in Aaron Rodgers now that's even less mobile than the guys you had last year, and you're talking about a third-year player now playing his first NFL season at left tackle in Broderick Jones, and then 3 second-year players, one of them in Troy Fautanu, last year's first-round pick, who hardly played because of a knee injury. So I think this is actually the biggest determinant this year of success for the Steelers, because if this young group either has more injuries or Broderick Jones can't get better than his first 2 years, or anything goes wrong on the inside, then I think you're talking about a scenario where this offense could fall apart. You know, I know Arthur Smith wants to run the ball, get Caleb Johnson and Jalen Warren the zone schemes going, and Aaron Rodgers has to be protected back there, and he can help out. He gets rid of the football quicker than Russell Wilson does, but this is where I would have my biggest concern for the Steelers season, is this offensive line, especially the offensive tackle spots. You have one moving to left tackle who struggled, and you have one who hardly played last year at right tackle, and he's never played right tackle in his life. So I'm in between on this. It's a very young offensive line, and it's a very theoretical offensive line to me. This placement speaks to both their potential and the potential for it to fall apart, I think.
Titans, sort of real quick, because I just think that there's so much unknown here. I mean, Cam Ward, how he sees the field, how quickly he can get the ball out of his hands, what the run game is going to be like, how those receivers are going to be able to get open. I think all of that goes into guys like J.C. Latham and Dan Moore Jr., Lloyd Cushenberry coming back. They had a Kevin Zeitler in free agency, which I think was a nice add for them. But I think that anywhere from 28 to, honestly, probably 24, where they're at here in this ranking, I think is fine for the Tennessee Titans. It's just a big wait-and-see type of an offensive line. Really quick, do you agree?
No? Agree. Waiting for the breakouts on Skoronski and Latham. That's all you're waiting for.
The next 5, we'll go at the Kansas City Chiefs here at number 20. We've got the Washington Commanders at number 19. 18, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders. 17, Baltimore Ravens. And then 16 is the Arizona Cardinals. So that's the next group of 5 here. Kansas City, you're losing Joe Thuney. You're bringing in Jalen Moore. You're bringing in Josh Simmons as well. You still have Creed Humphrey, you still have Trey Smith, like you still have those guys that are there, but a lot of this really leans on what Jalen Moore is going to be as a free agent addition, and then what Josh Simmons I think could be as well. You know, obviously there's only great things that are coming out from camp. Like what did who did George Karlaftis compare Josh Simmons to the other day? Wouldn't Trent Williams? Who was it? It was somebody. I can't remember. I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was like, oh, okay, like that's insane praise. Like whoever it was. Like again, I can't remember who exactly he was talking about, but obviously the hopes are high. It's hope season here. So, what do you think about the Kansas City Chiefs and their quest to continue to get back to the Super Bowl?
I think it's exactly what it is you have a superstar, I think the best center in football in Creed Humphrey. You have a very good player in Trey Smith, and the 3 other spots are major question marks. Obviously, Jawan Taylor's got one more year at right tackle, but he struggled the last couple of years, especially with penalties. And then that left side is one of the biggest mysteries in all of football, right? Not just between Moore and Simmons at left tackle, but who in the world is playing left guard, right? And we've seen in both of the Chiefs' Super Bowl losses, it's been because of their offensive line. Even Patrick Mahomes can't take as much pressure as he has in those 2 losses. So the left side of that line, both left tackle and left guard, is going to be one of the biggest stories, I think, throughout the entire NFL season.
It was indeed Trent Williams.
I
was like, there's no way it's Trent Williams. That doesn't make any sense. It was indeed Trent Williams. I think Jason Kelsey actually said that as well on the Kelsey Brothers podcast. And so extremely high praise. Extremely high praise there for a guy who hasn't played an NFL snap compared to one of the best that we've seen in the league, I would say, over the last decade. But hey, I was somebody who really loved Josh Simmons, so I love to hear it. That would be great for my draft prior. So hey, that's all good with me. The Washington Commanders. I think that people would look at this and say, man, this is low for Washington here at number 19. But there is a lot of new. There is a lot of change. Sam Cosmi's going to miss most of the year, if not all of the year, with that ACL injury. Laramie Tunsil is swinging in at that left tackle spot. You've got Josh Connerly Jr., you got Andrew Wiley as well, Tyler Biotish at center, Brandon Coleman probably at one of those guard spots there. You have Nick Allegretti as well. I would have Washington higher than 19. What do you think here?
I think I could reason with it. Before the Tunsil trade, they were probably in the bottom 8, I'll be honest. And the one thing that makes me worried about it this season is the Sam Cosmi injury. But I'll say this, they have a lot of options, right? And I think they're going to have a couple of open competitions, especially at these 2 guard spots with Cosmi hurt early in the season. You've got Brandon Coleman. You've got Nick Allegretti. You've got, a guy like Andrew Wiley who can play inside or outside, right? They're going to be doing some different things to find the right 5. But I think the idea behind the improvement of this offensive line, and I said this in Houston, I think it was the case, or I even talk about with Teron Armstead in Miami. Laramie Tunsil's a guy, because he can win all his one-on-one matchups, who makes the rest of the offensive line better, especially in pass protection, right? And I think it just speaks to the theme of trying to build around Jaden Daniels this offseason. I think they're going to be better than last year. Obviously, they have Tunsil. I really like Connerly. I was a big fan of his. It wouldn't shock me if he ended up with the starting right tackle job at some point. So I think this is the right placement. I think it speaks to, okay, this was a bottom 8 or 9 unit last year that got a big-time player in Laramie Tunsil that also added Josh Connerly. Sam Cosmi is hurt. He's probably going to miss the early portion of the season. If I were guessing, I think this is about right, going, okay, this could be better by the end of the year for sure, but let's wait before we really anoint him anything towards the top of the league.
Yeah, it feels like the vibes for Washington, you'd want to have this unit higher, especially with adding Tunsil, and they can figure out the other spots, and certainly when Sam Cosmi comes back. But I do think the data points to keeping them a little bit lower. Now, 19, I don't know exactly where I would land if I did this whole exercise myself, but there is reason to kind of understand that, hey, like, let's wait and see type of approach here, because for the Commanders, they were 28th in the NFL at impact run blocking percentage at a 38.2, and so that's not as strong as you would think that it would have been. And then when it came to pass blocking grade as a team last season, they were 22nd. Now, naturally, I think that the pass blocking grade gets better with you having Tunsil. Okay, it's a little bit of an upgrade there, but you're losing Cosmi. You're losing the best offensive lineman that you had last year, so there's a little bit of addition and subtraction there. The run blocking wasn't as solid as you thought that it was. It's maybe I thought that it would have been last year, and so those things have to improve for them. So it feels as though I've got more hope in the Commanders than their 19th overall ranking here from Zoltan, but there is data that would point to, hey, let's be a little bit cautious with saying, like, yes, this is absolutely a top 10 unit, but we'll see with Washington. Las Vegas is at number 18, Baltimore Ravens at 17, and then Arizona Cardinals at 16. Dealer's choice, which one you want to talk about there, from the Raiders at 18, the Ravens at 17, and then the Cardinals at 16.
I'll actually take the Raiders, because I think by the end of the year, they could be a lot higher than this. They've got some young guys that are developing well. I think Jackson Powers-Johnson getting a whole year at center as opposed to splitting like he did last year. He graded significantly higher at center last year than he did when he was playing guard. DJ Glaze at right tackle was a really nice surprise for them, emerged as a starting caliber player. There's a question at their right guard spot, but I would honestly give Jordan Meredith a shot. He graded right around an 80 in 9 games last year, and then you have obviously Colton Miller and Dylan Parham on the left side, who are both really good players, especially Miller's a star. So I think that's a unit. If the young guys develop, the Raiders by the end of the year could be in the top 10 to 12. They could be a lot higher in this. We just have to see the young players have a really good year too, especially Powers, Johnson, and Glaze.
Yeah, before we move on to the top 15, I was surprised to see the Cardinals this high at number 16. Y'all, Froldholt graded well as a run blocker, but man, it felt like that interior offensive line was a struggle. When we talked about some draft grades and things that we would have liked to see more from the Cardinals in their offseason overall, additions to the interior offensive line and prioritizing that a little bit more was something that we emphasized there. Jonah Williams at that right tackle spot. I think Paris Johnson Jr. is getting better at left, but 16 felt a little high for the Cardinals. What do you think about that group real quick?
They're solid for what they are, because I think Paris Johnson's about to become a star in year 3, and then it's really just a matter of that right side of the offensive line especially. I think it's a matter of how much faith you have in a healthy Jonah Williams to at least play a solid right tackle, but this is a much better run-blocking unit than a lot of people give him credit for, especially when the interior is blocking well. The right side concerns me a little, but I could see it based on the way they've performed up front, especially over the last 2 years in the run game.
Yeah, and the data is favorable for them being around this spot, even with some of the struggles that they had with that same group, basically the same group that they had last year. It felt like when it was bad for Arizona, like it was really bad. You could point to the offensive line and say this was a major reason why they did not win this football game. But overall, for a full season, and larger sample size matter more because I think you get the clearer picture of what this unit is. 44.3 impact run blocking percentage. That was 15th in the NFL. And then when you look at their pass blocking, 76.5 pass blocking grade as a team. That was 4th best in the NFL. So I think that there were certainly areas, like I said, you could point to certain games and you could say, man, that was a major reason why they were not able to come away with a win, or why they were a little disappointing there. But full season sample size, they did play well overall. So maybe just more consistency is what we're looking to see from that group and that offensive line. All right, before we get to the next 5 within the top 15, got to talk to all the parents out there and ask them a question of what their child's future success looks like for them. Maybe it's them getting to own their own business. Maybe it's them traveling the world. Maybe them just living in a house comfortably. Whatever that looks like, you can help them achieve that with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. Your kids can't invest while they're minors, but this kids investment account that you can start right now allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments so much more time to grow. The funds can also be used for anything. It's not just when they're, young adults, much older, early 20s, late teens, whatever. I mean, you could use it when they're younger. You could tap into it for sports, music classes, tuition, tutors, things like that. And then maybe when they are a little bit older, maybe you do want to help them start a business or buy their first house, first car, whatever that looks like. Whole thing is online. Setting it up an account could take you as little as just 5 minutes, and then you manage your child's account right from your phone. Starts with just $20, no contribution limits to it. Tax advantages, funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. There's no commission fees to it, just a low flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET fabric.com/PFF. NFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. Los Angeles Rams coming in at number 15 here on the rankings of offensive lines heading into the 2025 NFL season. Green Bay Packers at number 14. Detroit Lions at 13. I think this might be a little bit of a surprise for some people, even with a little bit of addition and subtraction there, seeing the Lions at number 13. We'll have to talk about that in a second. San Francisco 49ers at number 12. And the Carolina Panthers just outside the top 10, coming in at number 11. We'll start with the Los Angeles Rams. Your boy Alaric Jackson, obviously, if he is fully healthy this season, I know that you really like that signing. Kevin Dotson's been great for them as a run blocker, especially as the Rams have pivoted to more of a power downhill run blocking type of a team. People, I think, when they think of Sean McVay, they think of that Shanahan tree. They think of that mid and outside zone type of running, and they do that. They do. But 2 years ago, they decided to zig when everybody else was zagging, trying to get to the sideline, trying to play a lot faster, and they said, all right, you're going to lighten the box a little bit here with less linebackers. We're going to run straight down your face. And so I think that they brought in some offensive linemen that could do that very, very well. Kevin Dotson's one of them. Rob Havenstein has been great as well. Alaric Jackson, I think, has been great in this role too. So the Rams are number 15. What do you think about them being right in the middle here of these offensive line rankings?
I think it's a perfect placement because when you look at how their season went last year, the games where they pass protected, they won, and the games where they didn't, they didn't. It was that simple because Matt Stafford's a little bit older now and he can't move like he used to. He's still a top 8 quarterback in a clean pocket, and he was one of the worst in the league under pressure. So I think this Alaric Jackson blood clot issue and how much time he misses could have a huge impact on how their season goes, especially early on. And I think if they can pass protect consistently, they got Coleman Shelton back at center too, a more veteran player than they were dealing with last year. He's been in the system before. If they can pass protect all season, they're a Super Bowl contender. If they can't, and they were more like last year where they ended up with the 3rd worst pass blocking grade in the league, then you're talking about a team that won't beat Philadelphia and the other elite teams in the NFC. So I do think it's a really good spot for the Rams at 15 to kind of call it, okay, this is kind of one of these X factors factor off the offensive lines. If they're healthy and play like a top 10 unit, they could win the whole thing. If they play in total like they did last year, they just will find a way to lose a game against an elite pass rush like Philadelphia or somebody like that.
Man, speaking of pass blocking, the Green Bay Packers coming in at number 14. I feel like opinions for the Packers offensive line are kind of all over the place, and it depends on how you see, whatever this starting five is going to be, how that's going to shake out. But this was the number 3 team in the NFL in terms of team pass blocking grade last season. They had 3 guys above an 80 for their single season pass blocking grade in Rasheed Walker, Zach Tom, and Elgton Jenkins. They add Aaron Banks. They also have Jordan Morgan, who they're thinking is going to get in the starting lineup this year. So this is a unit that could really pass protect very, very well. But on the flip side of things, they were very inconsistent, I think, when asked to run the ball. When it comes to impact run blocking percentage, which, like we've talked about, it means how often you are earning a positive grade on a run blocking play, their 41.5% was 20th in the NFL. And then when you look at the flip side of things, we have a number called defeated run blocking percentages, which how often you were earning a negative play. They were 14th in the NFL. So right around sort of like the middle of the pack, if not just on the other side of the second half in the league when it comes to run blocking. They just were not nearly as impactful and consistent as a run blocking unit as they were in pass protection. Now, I think a lot of people would tell you, hey, it's harder to be a great pass blocking team, so you'd rather have that and then sort of figure out the run blocking and sort of be able to work with that together. A lot of times that's cohesive as a unit, especially when you're running downhill, but certainly a lot of zone blocking chemistry is involved as well. But your thoughts overall, just on the Packers offensive line, some of the changes, getting Jordan Morgan mixed in there. What do you think about this group and them being ranked 14th here?
I think that sums it up pretty well. And I think what they're hoping is Jordan Morgan can find some sort of home, right? It seems like Rasheed Walker is still going to go into the season as their left tackle. And Jordan Morgan struggled at guard last year in the limited time that he played, and then Sean Ryan took over. I believe Ryan is still there, so there's games even early in the year where they were rotating and trying to figure it out. But they need Morgan to emerge as the former first-round pick, and then you can raise the ceiling on this unit. Zach Tom, to me, is a superstar. Jenkins and Walker are solid. Banks is solid, especially if you're trying to improve that run blocking like you just mentioned. So it feels like a solid unit that could be better if Morgan shows more potential and he's healthier than last year. But I think 14, again, is about right for Green Bay when they don't blow you away, but they're also not nearly among the bottom teams considering the talent they have.
All right, Detroit Lions. I knew that this would get the chat going. It obviously got the chat going here. Zoltan's got them at number 13 here. Is it too high, too low? What do you think? This is a unit that I think a lot of people looked at the Detroit Lions over the last 2 or 3 years and said it's one of either the ascending offensive lines if you're looking at it 3 years ago, and then the last 2 years it's been one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. Now, you lose Frank Ragnow, you lose Kevin Zeitler, you still have Graham Glasgow, but you're throwing in a couple of guys that are either young or rookies, Miles Frazier or Tate Ratledge, Christian Mahogany stepping into a full-time role. You have the offensive tackles now that you absolutely love and one of the best in the world at Penei Sewell, but them coming in at number 13 here on these rankings. I know there's the interior offensive line is absolutely in flux. What do you think about that, though? Because it feels like Zoltan is sort of with him having them at 13, it feels like he's much more wary of these changes here than optimistic that it's all going to work out for them. Where are you on the Lions offensive line for 2025?
I don't hate it if you want to argue them a couple of spots higher because you've got probably a top 5 tackle duo at least in Decker and Sewell. I get it. But also when you look at the interior, your interior 3 are a guy who was your lowest graded offensive lineman last year, a guy with 2 career starts, and another guy who's a rookie. Probably, I would think Tate Ratledge. We'll see who plays guard and who plays center between him and Glasgow, but I would think it's going to be Ratledge, Glasgow, and Mahogany in some order. And this is a team also, when you look at the depth behind this starting offensive line, I know it's something we haven't talked about with a lot of teams here, there's not a ton of depth behind it, right? And that's why they drafted several of those interior guys to try to add to that depth as well. But you're also now talking about, you mentioned a guy like Miles Frazier, rookie depth behind a rookie starter. Doesn't always work so great, right? So I can see between both the production of the interior unit, and you have to remember who your quarterback is in this situation. Is Jared Goff as a statue as much as anybody in the league. If he doesn't have interior protection, you suddenly have a serious problem because he's not going to be able to improvise out his way out of trouble like, say, a Kyler Murray or Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, whoever else would that's more mobile back there. So I think it's something we're going to end up endlessly talking about, Trev, August, September, and deep into the season is this Lions interior three and whether or not they can protect Jared Goff, especially when they just have to drop back and throw the football.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Lions as a pass blocking unit, they weren't as strong as they were run blocking. They were 18th in pass blocking grade as a team last season with a 68.9 overall grade, and they were 20th in total pressure percentage allowed at a 30.9. So they were back half of the league, just fringe top 20 when it came to what they were as a pass blocking unit. Now, the bread and butter for the Detroit Lions has always been, we're just going to absolutely bully you up front. And their numbers absolutely reflected that. They had the number 2 run blocking grade as a team last season at an 83.6, and they had the number 4 impact run play percentage at a 49.1. So this is a top 10, top 3 run blocking unit, no question about it. But when you look at the subtractions that they had, when we talk about the additions, some of those young guys that could fill into these spots, but when you look at the guys last year along this offensive line and what made that run blocking unit so great, Penei Sewell had the highest run blocking grade of any player on their team at a 91.5, an elite grade. Next was Frank Ragnow at a 90.9, and next was Kevin Zeitler at an 87.2. So those two guys were a big reason why Detroit was so good and so dominant when running the football. Now, I'm not going to say like it goes immediately to zero with these new guys coming in, but I don't think it's going to be as good. Now, the encouraging part is that when you look at Christian Mahogany, he had a 91.9 run blocking grade. Now, I didn't include him there because those other guys played over 1,000 snaps, and Christian Mahogany only played 144 run blocking snaps last year. But his elite 91.9 grade goes into, I think that people believe that he's going to fit like a glove in that interior offensive line and exactly what they want to do. So him being an addition there as part of the subtractions, I think you feel good about that one, but there's still other snaps to be divvied out that have to play well on that offensive line. So 13 is still low for me. I would have them higher. I would probably still have them as a top 10 offensive line in the NFL. But when you look at where they were at as a team, pass protection wise, knowing that with new names, it's going to require new chemistry as well. And the fact that they probably won't be as dominant up front as a run blocking unit because of those new guys that are going to be in there, or at least it's probably going to take about half a season to get there if they're going to get there in 2025. I can understand being a little bit more hesitant on this. So again, I'd have it a little bit higher than 13 where Zoltan's got them, but I think that it was good to sort of bring up these concerns. I think everybody just looks at Detroit's offensive line and thinks, yeah, of course, top 5 offensive line in the NFL. But there are things that could tell you, hey, it will be good, but it might not be as dominant as it has been in years past. Niners at 12, Panthers at 11. Any thoughts there real quickly with those two before we move on to the top 10?
I think the Niners, you just need a healthy Trent Williams. And I know he's going to be 37 years old, but he's still one of the elite players in the NFL. And things really went down the tubes for their offense last year when Williams got hurt. I believe it was after week 10 he did not play, and that's when really things started to be a struggle. So if Williams is healthy, the Niners still have a good unit. And then Carolina, they spent a boatload of money last offseason to protect Bryce Young, and it worked in year one, especially even in the run game too, in front of Chuba Hubbard. This year they're going to have Hubbard and Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne. So I think both solid units as long as they stay healthy. Trent Williams, a big X factor for San Fran.
Yeah, Damian Lewis, Ike Ekwonu, Robert Hunt, those guys, I mean, just really solid, specifically run blocking grades, but just overall PFF grades. I mean, they had, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players along their offensive lines with single season overall blocking grades above 70. So the floor of this Carolina Panthers group just feels like it's so high, and it's just a matter of where's the ceiling, right? I think that you're not really worried about Carolina's offensive line being like, oh boy, what's the variance going to be? Are they going to be dominant this week? Or are they going to be, a reason why we lose? Kind of the way that we talked about the Arizona Cardinals. It felt like they were a high and low roller coaster throughout the season. It doesn't feel like that's the case with Carolina. It feels like you know exactly what you're going to get every single week. It's just a matter of where's the ceiling with this group? How much better could they get? So I really like the guys that are in with Carolina. It feels as though that offensive line being in front of Bryce Young is why you feel better about the skill position additions that they have made, some of those changes and those upgrades there, to think that Bryce Young can hit the ground running from last season. To me, it's that offensive line that really gives you faith that he can continue to ascend into one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. All right, getting into the top 10. Los Angeles Chargers, we have at number 10, one of the best, I would say, offensive tackle duos that we have in the NFL. And I think that Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt are going to showcase that this upcoming season. Your New York Jets, cracking the top 10 here, getting in at number 9. Got to get your thoughts on that. The Atlanta Falcons at number 8, one of the better run-blocking units in the NFL. And when I say that, it's probably not giving them enough credit. Dominant over the last couple of years with a couple of those players, but losing Drew Dahlman, so we got to talk about that a little bit. Minnesota Vikings coming in at number 7. A lot of changes, especially along their interior offensive line. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 6 to round out this second-to-last group of 5 offensive lines in the NFL. Let's start with the Los Angeles Chargers. You know, you've got some things that you're kind of working on along that interior offensive line. You bring in Mekhi Becton, so he played well last year for the Philadelphia Eagles, but that's a new guy coming into a new scheme there. Where is Zion Johnson going to play? What you're doing with that interior offensive line, you're still kind of figuring it out to see how they're going to play out, but you can't deny these 2 offensive tackles and how good these guys are and how they could be the best offensive tackle duo in the NFL.
Yeah, they could be. I mean, Slater was the second highest graded tackle in football last year. And then Joe Alt, I've told you before, he's my breakout player. And not that he wasn't good in his rookie year, because he was really good at top 25 tackle, but I think he could be a top 10 tackle this year. He did the same thing at Notre Dame. Year 2 there after starting as a true freshman, became a superstar. And then over the next 2 years was the highest graded tackle in college football. I think there's a reason they took him 5th overall in this draft, right? Why Jim Harbaugh loved him so much. That's the type of player that he can be. If he becomes that in year 2, you talk about this being fully justifiable, them in the top 10 and possibly in the top 5 by the end of the year. So it's really just about how big a step Joe Alt takes. To me, they got to figure out some things in the interior, especially with their run blocking. But I also think a better running back situation back there this year is going to help that out a little bit. So it's a really good unit they have, but that tackle duo is absolutely something to watch this year. Slater's already elite. Alt, I think, is on his way to getting there.
Yeah, the run blocking, like you mentioned, 72.4 run blocking as a team last year. That was 12th in the NFL. But it's worth noting, 41.3 impact run blocking percentage, 44.6 in a defeated run blocking percentage. So higher defeated run blocking play percentage than a positive one. You obviously want to flip that if you can, but it's sometimes tough to gain those positive plays, and it's a lot easier to, if you don't do your job exactly right, you can gain a negative there. So it's kind of just a microcosm of what offensive line looks like. But they came in at number 12 on the run blocking grade, and so if that gets better, if that gets into the top 10, I mean, I think that's absolutely going to justify what this group could be. What do you think about the Jets? You know, the Jets are with drafting Armand Membou, sliding him into play right tackle. You got Olu Fashanu at left tackle. I talked about Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater being one of the best offensive tackle duos in the NFL. It feels like Armand Membou and Olu Fashanu are going to be talked about as one of the best young offensive tackle duos in the NFL. But then you got John Simpson, you got ABT, and you got Joe Tippmann there at the center spot. So you feel confident about your Jets? Because here's the thing about this offensive line group. They're going to run the ball a lot. Right? I mean, like they've got Justin Fields. They really want to see exactly, I think, what they have in Breece Hall, especially this new coaching staff getting to work with him. So I think this team's going to run the football a lot. When you look at the run blocking grades last year for the New York Jets, where were the Jets here? Run blocking. 3rd in the NFL, 83.0 as a team. They were top 3 in the NFL. Impact run blocking percentage, 55.8. That was second best in the NFL. And so if they are leaning into run blocking, I think that only gets better with Armand Membou now at that right tackle spot. And so that feels like it's going to be their identity. How do you feel about them at number 9 here on this list?
I think for me, there's, as usual with the New York Jets, there's a tempered optimism to it, because it's going to be Fashanu's first full year at left tackle, back at his natural position where he was much better last year. So I do like that. Membou is still a rookie for as much as everybody loves him. He's still a rookie. It's going to take some time. And then I really need Elijah Vera Tucker healthy. Anytime he's been healthy on the field, he's been really, really good no matter what position he's playing, because he's played everything but center in his career. But you need him healthy at that right guard spot, somehow playing 17 games, because he's very good when he is. John Simpson had a career year last year. I think Joe Tippmann's a top 10 center in the NFL. So there's a lot of youth, and there's some question question marks to me, especially with Vera Tucker's health, but I can see it when it comes to, if you're just talking about one of the most talented offensive lines in the league, you are talking about the Jets, and that really needs to be the core of this offense. That's what Aaron Glenn and Tanner Enstrand and those guys did under Dan Campbell with the Lions, is they had an offensive line that was the core of the team. The Jets are trying to build the same thing here. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think there's still, to me, it could teeter either way because they're still very young. They could be a little lower than this by the end of the year. They could be top 5 by the end of the year, I think, depending on how well the tackles develop especially.
The Atlanta Falcons at number 7. Yeah, they're missing Drew Dahlman, but number 1 in the NFL in run blocking grade as a team at an 89.4. Number 1 in impact run blocking percentage at a 58.5. And so just an absolute dominant run blocking unit there. Oh, sorry, with them coming in at number 8. Number 7, I want to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. I'd have the Minnesota Vikings at number 4. And we're going to get to the teams that are in the top 3, and I'll tell you why I'd have those 3 teams still above them. It's really just because they've proven it with most of the offensive line that they have right now still established. But I truly believe that the Minnesota Vikings could have the best offensive line in the NFL. I mean, this unit is fantastic. If Christian Darrisaw is fully healthy for this fully season, I think he's a phenomenal offensive tackle. I think that Brian O'Neill is as well. They can compete for the best offensive tackle duo in the NFL. I love what Will Fries was able to show us last season before he went down with injury. Ryan Kelly's an experienced, solid center in this league. And then Donovan Jackson, I think, is going to be fantastic for what this team wants to do, especially from a zone blocking perspective. So I think that this offensive line is experienced, it's athletic, and they can run the exact type of run blocking scheme that Kevin O'Connell wants to in Minnesota. To me, this is one of the most talented offensive lines in the NFL. And if I think that if these guys are fully healthy as a unit for a season, there are going to be multiple spots in which they are ranked number 1 in certain efficiency, whether it's, pressure percentage or run blocking percentage, like whatever that looks like. I think this unit is that good. So I'd be higher on Minnesota. I love what they did in the offseason. I think they're going to be phenomenal up front.
Yeah, I think placing them at 7 instead of in the top 5 really just speaks to Christian Darrisaw and Will Fries needing to come back healthy, especially Fries. He was breaking out. It was a small sample, only played 5 games, but the potential is absolutely there. If this front 5 plays 17 games or something close to it together, they're going to be really, really good in Minnesota. I'm with you. It's just about those 2 guys getting back healthy. Ryan Kelly's going to be reliable. I think the entire point of drafting Donovan Jackson is that he's going to be at least a reliable starter very, very quickly. I think he's going to adjust well. And Brian O'Neill's one of the most underrated players in football. By the end of the year, I should say, or maybe even by the end of September, if these guys are healthy, we could look at this as solidly a top 5 unit. I think that's the only thing that holds it back is the health of those 2 guys.
And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 6. Luke Gedecke's been great at right tackle. Tristan Wirfs is an all-world player at left tackle. Graham Barton, I think, had a really solid rookie season. I think that only gets better. And I think just the interior guys that are next to him, they play well together. Not only does Tampa have the star power, but I think they just have the chemistry. They have one of the best chemistries of the offensive lines in the NFL. And so I think them being a fringe top 10 offensive line, it makes a lot of sense because when you look at pass blocking percentage, I want to make sure that I pull this up and get this right, 82.8. Overall pass blocking grade as a team last season. That was 2nd in the NFL. And then when it comes to pressure percentage, pressure allowed, once again, 2nd in the NFL at just a 21.0%. So this is one of the best pass blocking units in the NFL. And I think with these guys having another year together, and especially we talked about this a little bit with the Buccaneers. They were kind of in between on, they didn't really know, okay, are we more of a zone blocking team? Are we more of a man gap scheme type of downhill run game? They were sort of trying to figure that, they were trying to figure that out with Dave Canales basically throughout his entire first year as the play caller there. And then last year with Liam Cohen, through the first half of the season, it was very evenly split. They were trying to figure out what they did better. But in the second half of the season, when they leaned into that downhill running game, power concepts, especially when Bucky Irving really became that starting running back for them and took over the lion's share of those carries, the run game efficiency went through the roof. So I think that getting to start this upcoming season, knowing what your identity is as a run blocking team, that to me absolutely justifies the fact that they are a fringe top 5 offensive line in the NFL. You could talk about them in that top 5 conversation because to me they are that good.
Yeah, the only thing I really need left out of him is for Graham Barton to make the same year 2 jump that Cody Mauch did, but I think he was solid. He got a lot of tough assignments playing center for them every snap last year, so I think you're really talking about Graham Barton being an X factor on them getting even higher, but the base that you have with the tackle duo of Wirfs and Gedeke and then the way the interior is starting to develop, it's a really darn good unit with a lot of really great skill position players around them.
All right, let's get into the top 5. The top 5 offensive lines that we have in the NFL going into the 2025 season. Written by Zoltan, of course, as you can see over at PFF.com. Make sure I say that for the people who might have joined the show a little bit later. Indianapolis Colts, we have them at number 5 here. We've got the Chicago Bears at number 4, Buffalo Bills at 3, Denver Broncos at 2, and then, of course, surprise, surprise, Philadelphia Eagles at number 1. Number 5, Indianapolis. I'd have Indianapolis a little bit lower. Like, I'd have the Bucs above the Colts. I'd have the Vikings above the Colts. I'd probably start to think about them right around when we have the conversation with the Jets and the Falcons. I've got a lot of respect for what the Colts have been over the last couple of years, but, you're losing Ryan Kelly. You're losing Will Fries. I like Matt Goncalves. I like Tanner Bortolini, but big changes. I mean, you're replacing guys that have either been around for a while or, man, you looked at the impact that you mentioned Fries had in that small sample size last year. And so I still think the Colts are going to be a good offensive line. But there are a couple, like, again, Tampa's, Minnesota's that I would have had a little bit ahead of them. So I'm a little bit more cautious on what they're going to be replacing those two guys going into next season. What do you think?
I think what I would do with these rankings is the Colts and Falcons at 5 and 8. I think I would just flip them, those 2 spots. I would actually still have the Falcons at 5. I know they lost Drew Dahlman, but the other 4 are all fantastic football players, and at least Ryan Newsel at center has been in the system for a couple years. I think that's what I would do is I'd flip the Colts and the Falcons and play it like that. I still think the Falcons are fantastic, but the Colts, yeah, you just mentioned it on the interior with Kelly and Fries both going to Minnesota. You've got Bortolini. You've got Dalton Tucker played a lot last year, too. I think you might have an open competition at that right guard spot with Bortolini probably playing center, but the other 3 players are fantastic. When you look at Bernard Ryman's one of the most underrated players in the league, an elite left tackle. Quentin Nelson might be on his way to the Hall of Fame one day at left guard. Braden Smith, at least one more year there at right tackle, a solid veteran. So it is a very good unit, but I'm with you. There's probably 2 or even 3 teams that I might put ahead of the Colts. I wouldn't drop them too far because they have a really good base and they're coached really well, but I think I would flip them probably with Atlanta at 8.
I agree. It's not like I'm saying you should drop them like a rock, but I would have them a little bit lower. I'm a little bit more cautious on them for this upcoming season at least. The Chicago Bears at number 4. So Chicago, when you look at their interior offensive line, it is completely different. You mentioned Drew Dahlman, who is fantastic for the Atlanta Falcons as a run blocker there at center. He now steps in at center. You got Jonah Jackson, who was great as a run blocker as well. Joe Thuney's been unbelievable for the Kansas City Chiefs on their Super Bowl runs. You add him to that other left guard spot. And then you've got Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright, who are the 2 highest graded offensive linemen for Chicago last season. Braxton Jones had a 79.1 overall blocking grade last year, and Darnell Wright had an 81.9. Now, Darnell Wright was a little bit better as a run blocker, 82.2 run blocking grade there for him. But he was solid as a pass blocker as well, 75.4 in his second year in the league. And then Braxton Jones was actually the best pass protecting offensive lineman for Chicago last year at an 80.8 overall grade. And so, to me, look, it's obviously a big projection because, like we talked about with the Detroit Lions, right? Like the Lions, we've got to project these guys who are new or younger or whatever it is. With Chicago, it's not necessarily younger for these players, but it is new. And so there's a little bit of a projection there. But I think that certainly with Ben Johnson, who knows what it's like to coach behind a very good offensive line himself coming from Detroit, I've got a lot of faith in this offensive line. I don't know if I would have had them 4. I would have had them close to this conversation, though. Like, I think if you want to just say, hey, they're top 8, top 7, whatever, I think that they are in this conversation for one of the better offensive lines in the NFL if it all comes together.
No, on paper, I think they're absolutely top 5. I'm in. I'm all in on this because I think, you have Braxton Jones who's coming off an injury, but yeah, I know he gets a lot of flack in Chicago. He's not that bad. He's like a top 25-ish tackle, and that's not bad. It's not a bad thing to have at left tackle. Darnell Wright is slowly becoming becoming a star. And then you look at, again, the interior three that they acquired. Jonah Jackson is familiar with Ben Johnson's system from their days in Detroit. Drew Dahlman is a perfect fit, and I think my favorite free agent acquisition of the entire offseason. And Joe Thuney, during his time in Kansas City, was the best pass-blocking guard in the NFL. So you're looking at Caleb Williams now behind this front five that they have, at least on paper, and you're going, okay, it's on you now. There's no excuses up front. It's not about picking up stunts or any of that. They should be able to do that, and they should be able to run the ball well. I think on paper, we haven't seen it yet, I think this is absolutely a top 5 offensive line. I have no issue with this with the Bears.
The Buffalo Bills come in at number 3. Just such a good unit together. And honestly, when you're blocking for a quarterback like Josh Allen, who has the ability to hold on to the ball for a while and do a lot of special things, that's sometimes even tougher on the offensive line, because think about it just in a simple form. When that ball is snapped, you don't know where it is. Like, obviously, you know the play call, you have a good feeling of where the ball is supposed to go, and so you're angling yourself and you're holding your blocks to as long as you think you need to. But sometimes the biggest and best Josh Allen plays come from him improvising. And when you have a quarterback who can improvise the way that he can, sometimes that puts a lot of stress on an offensive line. Not only to block longer, but also not commit penalties, not commit those holding penalties, not knowing exactly where the ball is or where the quarterback is going. It feels as though the chemistry between the Buffalo Bills offensive line and Josh Allen is so good. And I think it's a big reason why the Buffalo Bills offense is as good as it is. They were 5th in overall pass blocking grade last season. They were 7th in total pressure percentage allowed. They were around middle of the pack when it came to impact run blocking percentage. And so they weren't as dominant as a run blocking unit. But man, they just all come together so well. I love the Buffalo Bills offensive line. They feel so very comfortable in their identity, not just in what the offense wants to do, but also in their quarterback and in what he is capable of and how they complement one another. So the Buffalo Bills being at number 3. When I talked about the Minnesota Vikings, I think that I would have them at 4 going into the season. I could see them being number 1 when the season is over, but it's hard for me to put them over a experienced and established offensive line like Buffalo at number 3 and these other 2 offensive lines that we're going to talk about. So Buffalo's fantastic.
We would have to check it, but are the Bills the only team in the NFL with the same starting 5 as they had last year? I mean, continuity. They always talk about continuity on the offensive line, but it's pretty darn close when you look at the Colts are another one considering the kids that did play, but they're one of the few, if not the only team that has the same starting 5 coming back. Plus the 6th guy in Alec Anderson, who's big in Joe Brady's scheme, is that 6 offensive lineman.
I think Arizona is too, right? Paris Johnson, Jonah Williams, Isaiah Adams, Yalda Froholt, and Evan Brown.
Yeah, that sounds right. Adams played a lot late last year.
I think those were the same starting 5. But it's a good call up by you, because it almost never happens. And again, for as much success as Buffalo had last season, to bring back that entire unit is special. You just don't get that a lot.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, it's worth mentioning that 6th guy, Alec Anderson, because the Bills use 6 offensive linemen more than any team in the league by far. Joe Brady likes to have that extra guy out there for the run game. Get him back, too, so you have all 6 of them plus a little bit of depth behind them. So it's a really good unit, and I think you mentioned it. As a unit, it really is greater than the sum of its parts. Deion Dawkins, obviously, the best player, but they don't have another superstar. They're just really good as a unit, and it fits the character of that team with the way they want to have balance in that offense.
The Denver Broncos, man. Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, Quinn Miners, Mike McGlinchey. Wait, is that the same stuff?
That's actually another one. That's the same 5.
I was going to say, that was like, we just got right to it with the Denver Broncos. Number 1 in team pass blocking grade last season at an 84.2. Number 1 in lowest pressure percentage allowed, and that is with a rookie quarterback, too. 19.2%. I mean, this unit was fantastic last season and established themselves as one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. If you want to go over to run blocking as well, they were 10th, so they were top 10 in overall run blocking grade at a 75.6, and then their impact run blocking percentage, where were they here? 14th at a 44.6. And so just an elite group when it comes to working together and being a fantastic pass protection group and understanding what their rookie quarterback was capable of, what he was going to do, what Sean Payton wanted from them as the offensive architect, I should say, and where the ball is going and when it's coming out of Bo Nix's hands, everything, man. It just felt like Denver was able to play so well together, and with that starting five coming back, I mean, you've got to give them that credit and that respect that they deserve from what they were able to do in 2024.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They were held responsible for the lowest percentage of pressures on Bo Nix last season as a unit. So, I mean, you just look at what they did and how much easier both the offensive line and Sean Payton, how they made life easier for Bo Nix. Garrett Bowles is a stud. Quinn Miners is a stud. Mike McGlinchey's been awesome for a long time. Powers and Wattenberg are certainly solid on the inside. It's just a really good fight. And you have to remember that, too. Their first or second year under Sean Payton and their first with Bo Nix, the way they've developed and the chemistry they already have that quickly, and the fact that, again, that same five is coming back this year, that's a great base for this Denver offense to have. Very quietly, everyone talks about Bo, Cortland Sutton on the outside. We're going to talk plenty about R.J. Harvey in the backs, but this offensive line is the best part of this offense, and it gives them a core to work around to find some points on the outside.
The Philadelphia Eagles, the number one offensive line in the NFL going into the 2025 season. I feel like this is not a surprise to anyone. Jordan Mailata, winner of our Offensive Lineman of the Year last year, a 96.3 overall blocking grade. Just absolutely ridiculous. A 94.6 run blocking grade and a 90.8 pass blocking grade. Of course, they have the future Hall of Famer in Lane Johnson at right tackle as well, a 90.6 overall blocking grade last season. 79.8 overall grade from Lander Dickerson, 66.2 from Cam Jurgens, and then Mekhi Becton at a 71.4. He'll be replaced with Tyler Steen, who didn't play well last season, but I think that getting to play with those guys as a full-time starter should help him out there. Although it is worth noting, 37.5 pass blocking grade from Tyler Steen last season, so that certainly has to get better. But when you have those two all-world offensive tackles, I mean, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. And you talk about these guys, Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. I mean, like that's where the conversation is with the best offensive tackle duos in the NFL. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. But that's the ones that come to my head of the ones that could play the best here in 2025. The Lions as well. The Lions have a great offensive tackle duo with Decker and Penei Sewell. So is there any argument at all whatsoever with the Eagles at number one versus some of the other teams that are right behind them? We had a lot of really nice things to say about the Buffalo Bills and the Denver Broncos, but is it close or is it just, it's absolutely Philadelphia?
No arguments here. Three superstars in Mailata, Johnson, and Landon Dickerson. A solid center going into year two of playing center in Cam Jurgens. They're going to have a competition at right guard, but I think what does it for me, honestly, to really seal it, they have a silly amount of depth. They got Kendall Lamb from Miami, who's at least a very solid backup. Matt Pryor, who was starting at right guard, and I don't think should be taken out of that competition to start at right guard for the Eagles this year. Got a bunch of young guys. Drew Kendall, they drafted. Cameron Williams, Miles Hinton. I mean, they have so many guys, even behind those front five, that if they needed to survive without one of them for a few weeks, like they did last year with Jordan Mailata, actually, they're going to be just fine. I mean, the top-end talent, the depth. Trev, you want a fun fact real quick? Last year, because I'm putting together a series of articles that are basically single-season rosters, right? What does every team look like if they had the player who had the highest graded season at each position, right? For the Eagles, it was at left tackle 2024 Jordan Mailata and at right tackle 2024 Lane Johnson. The best single season grade for an Eagle at each position last year, and obviously they're coming back this year. Lane Johnson is just ageless, right? I mean, he just doesn't stop, and he had his best season last year. So you got superstars, you've got a boatload of depth. Yes, you have a competition at right guard, but I'm really not worried about it because you had the same thing patching in last year with Mekhi Becton. So this team, they're so well coached, they're so talented. They're going to be number one at a lot of different units when you really go in and look at it. But this offensive line, it's the core of their team. It always has been.
To wrap up the show, Cali Eagles fan is asking about Tyler Steen, specifically his pass blocking grade, saying that he wasn't nearly as bad. Like, how does he have such a bad pass blocking grade? Well, to pump up some premium stats, which you guys can see over at PFF.com if you go get a PFF Plus subscription, 179 pass blocking snaps from Tyler Steen. Yet he allowed 14 pressures, which was a 7.8 pressure percentage. That was highest on the team amongst the top 7 players that got the most snaps last season. Actually, I think Fred Johnson was a little bit more. Yeah, Fred Johnson was a little bit more, a little higher of a pressure percentage. But another thing that goes into having a low pass blocking grade is 5 penalties from him. That was tied for the second most penalties on the team, and yet he had the 7th most total snaps. And so a high penalty percentage, a high pressure percentage, that's obviously going to go into when you have a smaller sample size, since he did not start the full season, since he only played 399 snaps. When you have a good amount of negative plays on a smaller sample size, obviously you're going to get dinged more, because that's a bigger piece of the percentage. Not to say that Tyler Steen cannot play better, especially as a full-time starter there with that offensive line, but that's how we get to that grade there, because he had those blunders in a smaller sample size there. Like I said, you can go see that and so many other PFF stats that we have talked about here on the show if you go get yourself a PFF Plus subscription. You guys can do that over at PFF.com. Shout out to Dalton, who made the top 32 offensive line rankings that we went over here on this show going into the 2025 season. Make sure you follow his work as he grades and regrades and re-ranks the offensive lines every single week of the season to make sure it is as accurate and up-to-date as possible. That is it for us on the live side of things this week, but make sure you are subscribed to the channel, liking the video, doing everything to make sure you guys don't miss a lot of the other great videos that we have coming throughout the week. We've got all the film breakdowns. We've got some of the PFF rewrites. If you haven't seen those, they're really fantastic. Shout out to our production staff who's done an unbelievable job bringing those to life. They've been a lot of fun, so check those out. They're a little bit more give your imagination something to work with. Of, man, if we change these one little things that have happened in the NFL drafts over the last couple of years, how could the NFL look different? We got a couple of those videos, and we got more coming from me, so make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema, saying thank you guys so much for watching the PFF NFL show. We'll see you guys next week.